Do you play modded Minecraft? Do you play GregTech? And do you miss threefold? If these apply to you, you probably run into the common problem of ore processing inside of GregTech. Well, today I'm going to show you how to make it as simple as possible. I will start off by saying some basic knowledge of AE2 is extremely helpful for this tutorial, but if you have little to none, I will walk you through pretty much everything, so you should be good anyways to copy exactly what I have. Another little side note is I am using the Star Technology pack for this. This is a GT Modern tutorial, and I'm also currently playing Star Technology, so that is the reason I'm using this pack instead of Moni Factory or just base GregTech. So judging by the fact that you, the player, are watching this video, I'm going to assume that you are at least IV or at least reaching LUV, which is when you really start to need ore processing / when you can actually make it. So maybe you're just a little bit before ore processing, and specifically in Star Technology, and I believe it's the same for Moni Factory and most other GT Modern packs. In order to be able to use this tutorial, you are going to need Platline more than likely, so get that done. I'm also going to cover the assortment of machines that I have behind me, one of which being a centrifuge, a thermal centrifuge, 2 macerators, an electrolyzer, a chemical bath, an ore washer, and a sifter. So if you want to be on the same page as me, go ahead and place all of these inside of your world. And what I will be using specifically for this tutorial are elite parallel hatches, so the 4x ones, and 4 amp energy hatches, or 4 amp IV energy hatches. So once all of your energy hatches are 4 amp IV, you have your cleaning hatch. You don't need this biosecure one. This is just what auto built in creative. All of your parallel hatches are set to 4. If you have an even better one, great, use it. But for the sakes of this tutorial, we'll be using the 4x one. So in front of me, I have the basic, a very bare bones system of how this larger one's going to work. Ignore this. This is a poor attempt at what I'm about to show you here. So instead of kind of getting into the super duper nitty gritty of AE, which I will explain a little bit of, I'm instead going to kind of give it to you for what it is, because AE is just a tool that we're using for item routing here. So try not to overcomplicate it too much. And all this will be covered again once we actually apply it to the big system here. I just kind of want to show you guys a smaller version so you understand what's happening. So let's say, for example, I want to process raw gold. And how do I want to process it? Well, I want to send it through a forge hammer and then through a furnace, as the raw gold can be crushed into crushed gold ore, and that can be then smelted into gold ingots. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to make a forge hammer subnet, which is what this is here. I'm going to filter the storage bus on the interface that links to the forge hammer. So if you want a little explanation on how this works, whenever you put an item into an interface, it will look for storage on that network. And for this particular subnet, which you make via these quartz fibers, these only carry power and not data. The only storage on this network is this forge hammer. Now we will be adding storage buffers for the bigger system, but for kind of showing you how it works, this is what we want. And also what is very important is that we go ahead and we output whatever is made here back into the intake chest, so into this distribution subnet, if you will. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. If I go ahead and I put ore into this intake, which this is a pipe that's just extracting it and putting it into this interface, we can see it got crushed and sent back to the intake. Now what's very important is this storage bus on the intake has to be here with a low priority. And I'm going to explain why here in a second. So we want the items to be routed back to here. However, what if we want them to be sent to another machine instead of the intake chest again? Well, what we can do is we can go ahead and send this to another storage bus here, which, as you can see, I've set this one to the crushed gold ore. So raw gold will go into the forge hammer, crushed gold will go into the furnace. So if I put this back into the intake, we should see that be smelted up here. Perfect. And then we should see the gold come back into here as soon as I set the output. I might have actually already did this first. Okay, I did. So I have just a simple outbound chest here, which you can think of the same way as one of these machine subnets. It's just a storage bus going into some other place. So this could be your main AE system or a separate storage subnet that you put all your ores on. This part is completely up to you. Now, the reason I don't have the ores coming into the intake instead of just straight to the furnace, or no, the reason I don't have the ores coming to the intake and going to the furnace after the intake is because it's just adding an extra step for no reason. Really, when something gets stuck in intake, that means you don't have it filtered. So I want to test this one more time. We have our filters set, so the raw gold should go into here, and when it goes back into the distribution net, it should be sent into the furnace subnet. So I should be able to put this in intake, and I should see this number go up because it's being sent through here, going back into the distribution net and into the furnace. So by doing this, we kind of set up this little ore processing diagram line that we want. So in this case, what we're doing is we're sending it through the forge hammer and then just smelting it into gold. Now, obviously, a lot of ores are going to have more steps than this, but I want you guys to notice how easy it is to add another machine to this. All we have to do is create a separate subnet with another storage bus on it. That is literally it. So whenever you're filtering your ores, all you have to do is go into the storage buses and change the filter. You don't have to go through and make these complicated lines of filters on every single machine. All you have to do is go to your central routing system and change the filters on the storage buses. So a few really important things before we get started is make sure you have the probably highest tier available of input bus that you have access to on machines such as the electrolyzer or things that kind of take, let me pull up an example. If we look here, for example, if we were processing bluesite, we would need 11 pieces of this in order to start the electrolyzer recipe. Now, if you were to say have an ULV input bus and export that item into that bus and you didn't have 11 of it, you would then cause a backlog. So really the easiest solution to this is to just have a really big input bus. And if you wanted, you could even add more than one and that would solve your problems. Just make sure you don't have distinct buses on. And the second thing is make sure all of your machines have one of these ME output buses. And finally, I would say for your chemical bath and your ore washer, make sure you have an input hatch. So in this chest, I have a good list of items to have. Choose 9 different cables, 1 for each machine and 1 for your distribution net. This is going to make things very, very easy whenever you're trying to organize all of your subnets. I like to use wireless connectors just because it's easy and I'll show you exactly how I use them. And so that we have a buffer for each and every machine recipe that we want to run, make sure you have at least 8 ME drives. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and place an ME drive in front of every machine. You don't really have to put them in front. This part doesn't matter where you put them. Same thing with the cable colors, just as long as every single machine has its own subnet of storage. Now, again, you don't have to do that. You could do what I did over here and just have the storage bus from the distribution net onto the input bus, but I would rather not have distribution net get clogged because then that causes a whole bunch of issues. So having a buffer of items in each and every machine subnet is probably going to be the way you want to go, which of course means you're going to want item cells. I would opt for 64K. Usually that does just fine until maybe super duper late game, or if you expand the setup, which is definitely something you might want to do, but then you could just upgrade the storage whenever you get there. So I have chosen my white cable for my main net. Again, you could just use normal cable for this, but the reason the different colors are nice is because they will not connect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and assign every single machine subnet its own color. And again, this is just so it makes it really easy to tell what's going where and what machine net is what, especially because we're going to be using these same labels on our distribution net. And I like to have the terminals on here just so I can see what's being processed, or maybe if there's a clog, what's being clogged up. It could also help you find filtering issues that there's a good chance you will have on accident. You'll put a wrong filter in. Okay, so first step is done. We kind of have the outline for all of our subnets. We're going to start small, and then go big. So we're not going to make the main distribution system just yet, but instead what we're going to do is we're going to get the items from these subnets into the machine. So the easiest way I've found to do this for the most part, unless you have stocking input buses, which does require quantum stars, but I'm going to show the kind of cheaper way to do it, is just with the mod export bus. Now hear me out. Do hear me out. You could definitely use the stocking input bus, but let me kind of show you an issue with this. You do not have that many slots. So if you were to toggle automatic polling, yes, it would pull automatically from your drive. And that would work great for things like the macerator. In fact, I would recommend it if you can do it. But for things like the electrolyzer, it's not going to work that well if you have a bunch of small amounts of items like that pollucite, for example. We want a big input bus, not a small one. And unfortunately, the stocking input bus is not that large. So instead, what I opt for is just on each and every one of your input buses, go ahead and just put a mod filter with GTCEU, that being the mod where all of your ore processing stuff comes from. And of course, you're going to want acceleration cards on this. So this next part is very, very crucial. In fact, I'm going to move this over just to kind of explain that. You do not want this net to touch the output bus. That is going to cause a break, and we do not want that because this is just going to go straight into this drive, and this drive, the only thing it knows is input from here and then put into the machine. So make sure that when you are connecting this up, you do not connect it up to the output bus. Instead, all you have to do is connect this up with the drive, and boom, that is it. So we have our export bus connected to our ME drive. And if we had items in here and they were from the GTCEU mod, that being pretty much all of your ores, it will go ahead and go into the centrifuge. So go ahead and repeat this process for every single one of the machines. So once you've done that with all of your machines, I would recommend making it look a little nicer, putting it underground like I did with these three. I kind of got lazy here, but you guys get the gist. All that we're doing is exporting whatever mods are from GregTech or whatever items are from GregTech into the input bus. So you have your next step completely done. So if you want, you can go ahead and make all of these actual subnets by giving them some power, and we can go ahead and test them out. So for example, if I had more of that raw gold ore, and now we're to put it into this macerator, we should see that get taken out. Nope, except this. This ore is totally from Minecraft, but if I were to go ahead and use a different one, there are some special cases with this where I would say having a separate, I guess, yes, that does bring up this next point. So for things that aren't from GregTech, what I would recommend is, yes, do this part manually because you're only going to run into it like a few times. So what I'm going to do instead is just have a normal input bus and put whatever ore you find yourself needing in there. So for my example, gold into the macerator, and we should see that goes into the input bus. Now for a better example, if I were to find an ore that we probably are going to be seeing a little bit more, let's take silver, for example. If I were to put this into this net, we should see that immediately get taken out, and that should be in the input bus. So now, given this thing did have power, we then should see all of our products in here. So once you have all that up and working, it's on to something a little bit more complicated, but bear with me. So this is where your wireless, where do they go? Your ME wireless connectors are going to come in very, very handy. So I like to color them, just so it makes it really easy to tell what's going on. But for my distribution kind of interface, if you will, I like to have 8 different interfaces just like this. I like to have storage buses on each of these. So these are going to be the equivalent of these storage buses here. So these will be the ones that you filter. And once you do run out of space for filtering these, you can go ahead and just make capacity cards and you'll be able to use up all this space. And if even you use more than that, you can use more than one side, more than one storage bus on this for more filter space. So for my distribution net, I did use these white cables, so I'm going to stay consistent with that. So very, 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 very important. If you have nothing filtered in one of these machines, place a dummy item in here. Otherwise, you might find yourself with items in a machine that you never filtered, just because this might be closer in the routing for whatever reason. So if you have nothing filtered, go ahead and just place a dummy item in here. And this is a good practice for really every subnet when you have filtering like this. I use this practice all the time. So now if I were to put something into my distribution net and these were connected, nothing would happen because nothing is filtered yet. So your next step is going to be to connect each one of these interfaces to a wireless connector. And you're also going to want to connect a wireless connector to each and every one of these machine subnets. So all this does is transfer data / connects the network. So now all you have to do is, I think it's just right click on each and every one of these. And now I did say I really like to color these. It makes it really easy to tell. And after you use this for a good while, you'll kind of get a hang for what color is what machine. I made this exact setup in Modpack, and I was like, oh yeah, red is the centrifuge, white is the macerator. I memorized it, but you can also just use signs on your interfaces. It's another really easy way to tell what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and color the rest of these. So I now have 8 of these wireless connectors. As you can see, they are all online and connected. So that means if I were to put an item into this interface connected to the Cyan network, also I think this is the centrifuge, so the centrifuge network, it would go into this drive. So let's go ahead and test that. We can remove the filter, and let's grab that silver, or maybe I should do it with macerator. That would probably be a better plan. So we'll go ahead and use the lime one. We'll grab some ore. We'll use pitch blend, just some random ore. We'll put it into the filter. And now for the next step, the input chest. So there are a few ways you could do this. If you really wanted, you could wire your main net up to be this chest. I would be hesitant with that just in case maybe you don't want to process all of something and you accidentally do and you're like, oh, well, now I can't get it all back. Maybe you accidentally filter something. I would say it's generally a good idea to have kind of a barrier. I would definitely use something bigger than this chest though. So maybe an upgraded barrel. I don't know if Star Technology has those. I don't think so. I think an ME chest would also work. Anyways, a large storage. So this next part isn't really super important. All you really have to do is get the items reliably over to the distribution net at a good enough rate. So I'm using an IV conveyor module. This might be fast enough. If not, you could use laser IO, or there's plenty of item distribution methods inside of this pack. And well, all you have to do is hook this up to the distribution net, because as you guys remember, the distribution net, the only storage on the distribution net is the subnets of the machines. That's its entire purpose. So now if I were to put this pitch blend into here, we should see that actually go into the macerator and start macerating. Oh yeah. And I want you guys to notice, if we wanted to add a new ore into here, all we would have to do is add it to the storage bus. For every single one of these machines, all we have to do to add it to one of the machines, one of the paths, is just come over here to our control interface, as I like to call it, our distribution center. There's a lot of different things you could call it, and just add it to a filter. That is all you have to do. You don't have to go scrambling, and each and every one of these having one of these manual input buses. So you probably, again, will need one for one of these more annoying items that isn't just in GregTech. Or, again, for the macerator, which is probably really the only machine where you're going to run into that problem, you could, and again, I would recommend just using a stocking input bus on this guy, because the macerators only macerate single items. So you won't run into any of those backlog situations. So now for the last step, all you have to do is go ahead. If you guys remember, I said do not hook up your subnet to the output bus. Well, now what you're going to want to do, and again, I think the wireless connectors make this so easy. But what you could do, there's multiple ways of doing this. You can have a wireless connector on each and every one of these output buses, or you could hook them all up. It does not matter. It is up to you. But you want to hook these up to the distribution net. And as you can see, using multiple colors, these cables will not connect. And once these are all hooked up to the distribution net, again, the distribution net, not any of the machine subnets. So again, keep track of the colors. If you aren't really understand what's going on, keep track of colors and words. You don't really have to understand it. As long as you're, again, following the colors, you should be fine. So I have connected up all of my output buses to the white network, also known as the distribution network. And then I'm just gonna lazily, I love these things, hook this up to the distribution network. And again, I'm going to color this just so it's easy to tell. Now, the last important step for this is you are going to want to have one more storage on the distribution net with a low priority. So the reason you want a low priority on this storage bus, and you also want this unfiltered, You could put it on bidirectional or insert only. It doesn't matter. As long as it's not on extract only, you should be good. But the reason you want this as a lower priority than the rest is so that everything gets filtered into its proper machine and not back into the intake chest, right? So the intake chest, what's going to be put in here is, well, your initial intake to be filtered, and also every single item that you do not have filtered. So this makes it really easy. Okay, so for example, I put in that crushed silver and pitch blend. Okay, well, now I know I need to do the next steps. I need to filter these items next. So I'll go ahead and I'll do a quick little full run through of how I would go about doing this with completely new items. However, one last thing actually before I do start that is you might have noticed these input hatches. So these are going to be connected to wherever your fluid storage is. So for example, on some of these chemical bath recipes, like I know for tungstate, you need hydrochloric acid. What you could do is you could have that transported via the distribution net with a storage bus on your main net. Or what I do actually like to do is I like to just have a sneaky little connection to mainnet on these input hashes. So if I wanted my hydrochloric acid in here, I could just connect this up straight to mainnet, and I don't really want to have to worry about any of the ore processing subnet nonsense. So if you have an input hatch, connect that up to mainnet. And the one recipe I can particularly think of is, again, going to be your tungstate in the chemical bath. You want hydrochloric acid. Let's say, for example, you want to send your tungsten through ore processing. Well, how are you going to get the hydrochloric acid? Just pull it from mainnet, right? So if I had hydrochloric acid on the mainnet, it would just be, I think this is the chemical bath. Yes. So then it would be able to run that recipe. Okay, again, so let's go ahead and let's run some of these recipes through. I'm going to grab some random ores. So I have grabbed 5 different ores, some of which having more complicated lines, some of which not, scheelite being the main more complicated one. I've also connected hydrochloric acid to my input hatch on the chemical bath for the scheelite. Again, hook that up from mainnet, it'll save you a lot of time. So let's go ahead and run through exactly what I want to do. So at this point, if you have this built and you kind of know what to do from here, you're done. The system is pretty much built, except for you need an outbound chest, which actually I should show that. So I do believe I did talk about an outbound chest already, but all you really have to do is make another one of these interface subnet doohickeys and filter everything that's done. So I will go ahead and I will walk through this as well at the very end. So I've just made a simple kind of metaphor or kind of a mainnet. You would just have the interface connected up to your mainnet, which I have as the black net. So all like your main system would be this black net here. I just have a chest. This is acting as the main system or the outbound, right? So all you have to do is just add another filter here. Again, make sure you put some dummy item in here. If the filter is empty, or you're going to have a bad time. Okay, so let's run through the process. I have unfiltered items. What are they going to do? They are going to stay in the chest. Okay, so I know for a fact I want to send all of these through the macerator. And you guys might be wondering why I have 2 macerators. That's just because sometimes you use the macerator twice within an ore processing line. And having 2 can help prevent backlogs. That's really the only reason. I guess you could get away with 1. But typically I found 2 is really nice to have. So that is going to be the lime nets. So luckily I can see everything from here, so I can see exactly what's what. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to filter literally all of these on the lime net, and I'm going to have them run. So now, as we can see here, we're starting to get items that we do not have filtered yet, meaning we have to filter these. So some of these we are going to send back to mainnet, that being silver and stone. So those we're going to go ahead and send through here. And because I accidentally removed all the filters from that, see what happens, it totally breaks. So I have my silver and stone on the outbound, meaning everything here is stuff that I don't know what to do with yet. So this graphite, I probably want an outbound. Now, the system is prone to clogging if you don't have everything filtered or you run out of storage. So while yes, it does have easy access, what we just saw here was this stuff was getting clogged because of the way the kind of cycling system works. It's kind of shuffling through these right now and not looking at this item slot here. But if we were to move this to the first item slot, we would see that it would reroute back to what we want it to be. So make sure you have your filters set. It will help. Every time you have a new ore, you could also just periodically check this. That's what I would do. Kind of like it's its own maintenance hatch. Just check it, every few days, make sure everything's doing all right, and you should be good. So now we want to filter all of these. I'm just going to walk through the Scheelite one, and I'll filter everything else kind of in the background just to show you that it all works. But Scheelite, let's say, for example, we want to turn this into molybdenum. So I'm going to send this through the thermal centrifuge, which I believe is brown net here. So I'm going to send that through the brown net, and we should now see that gets sent through the brown net, and we should have those items end up back here, the ones that are unfiltered. I'm going to go ahead and also filter the rest, but really whatever you filter to is up to you. I'm just kind of walking through this example. So I've sent through all of those ores for their next round of processing, and I'm left with a whole bunch of junk. So some of this stuff is going to go to outbound, of course. And now we're ready for the next round of processing. So I'm going to, as always, walk you through the Scheelite. So from here, I'm just going to go ahead and macerate this down into Scheelite and the calcium. So the second macerator, so I'm going to put this on the red net. So the next round of ores has been sent through. I'm getting my Scheelite and all of this other stuff. Again, I am just filtering however I want it to. Again, it's up to you. So maybe you want to stop at a certain step, send it to mainnet. Maybe you want it to keep processing. Maybe you want a certain output. Again, you have the machines, you have the filters. It's completely up to you how you go about which different secondary outputs you want. So now the Scheelite, the main thing, just has to be sent through the chemical bath, which I believe is on the orange net over there. So we should now see this running, and because we have access to hydrochloric acid from a fake main net here, it should start running and making me that tungstic acid. So tungstic acid, I now just have to electrolyze, which I believe is that yellow net right there. And that's going to give me my tungsten, which is a final product. Oop, not acceleration cards. So I think you guys get the gist here. I took 5 stacks of ores. These 5 up here, and these are the different products I got from this ore processing line. I didn't really finish it. I'm not going to go through the rest of these. I think you guys get the point. So for one more little kind of test, I did go ahead and run through all of the ores, and this is all that we got. I'm going to get rid of all this. Let's now run through the starting product of Scheelite and see if we get the end product of tungstate. I do also think there are some fluids coming from this. This is up to you how you want to deal with this. I usually just send these to mainnet, but you probably will end up having some fluid outputs, especially in the electrolyzer. So be ready for this. And I would even go as far to say as you could put this output hatch and connect it to mainnet, your mainnet, and not your distribution net. Okay, anyways, enough getting sidetracked. Let's put the Scheelite in here and see what we end up getting. We should see machines running, but our end result should be a little bit of tungsten that ends up in here, along with some other stuffs. And it looks like it's working pretty well. So, yep, it does look like it's working. Another thing that I will note is that this does all run in parallel. So if one step takes longer and another one uses a different machine, they will still run at the same time. So very much a fan of that. The system's really nice. I find it very convenient. I'm sure there are so many ways you could do this. This is just my way of doing it and the way I did it in Moni Factory and the way I'm going to do it in Star Technology. Maybe with a little bit of modifications in Star Technology to make it a little bit faster by adding more machines. But, if you want to see more about that, do watch my series. But a little bit of a recap. The big gist, ores go in. You just have to filter them from here and know which color goes to which machine. That will go back into here, and then you filter it again, and it's kind of a cycle until you reach this outbound here, in which nothing comes back into the intake. So kind of a diagram of that in words is all of these subnets will go ahead and output back into the distribution net, whereas this main net does not. That is the only difference between outbound net and the machine nets. And that, my friends, is ore processing made simple, hopefully. Please do give me feedback. This is my first kind of my second tutorial that I've done on GregTech, so I'm not the best at it. I know. I'm sure there was some explaining on something that I could have been deeper on, or maybe I over-explained one part. Do let me know, and I will try to explain my best in the replies of your comment if you are confused on something, or if you want to say hi. Really, I'll say hello back. But that is GregTech Modern, and really you could apply this to probably like GT&H GregTech as well. You have applied Energistics. Obviously, you're going to need some changes, but the gist of this logic will stay the same for really any OR processing that you're doing. It really doesn't even have to be GregTech. To be honest with you guys, this is just an applied Energistics subnet system with an OR processing facade in front of it. So do let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck in your OR processing adventures, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Not next episode of Star Technology. I'm used to saying that. I will see you guys in the next video. Later.